So there was something that you said at the very beginning, and I took notes here, and I want to go back to it, which I thought was very interesting, which has to do with public radio doing things, public radio and public TV, doing things and pushing the envelope and playing and innovating in ways that um, you know, private channels and private radio stations and all that can't really do or don't do. Um, and that's
I
interesting
wouldn't.
because
I
I've
mean, I
noticed
wouldn't say
that. Go
that
ahead.
they. I wouldn't say that they can't or that they don't. I'm just saying that it is ingrained in the
Yeah.
history of public media.
Yeah. I mean, isn't it interesting? I'm sure people have thought and written about it that a lot of quality comes from public radio, right? And a lot of junk comes from private, radio. I know you don't want to take sides, but I'll take sides. I think there's just a lot of junk in private, in moneyed, institutions that need to make profit and so on and so forth. Whereas quality, for some reason, comes from PBS and from NPR. So maybe you can explain to me at least, like, how come? How come? How come I see a lot of quality in NPR, and how come I can't find it in Sirius Radio? To be honest with you, right? Finnish radio is entertainment and all that kind of stuff and all, and the more outrageous you are, the better. But if I want sanity and I want rationality and I want okay, civil discourse and civility, I go to NPR and I go to PBS. Am I biased? Am I seeing the world in a warped way? And again, you don't have
So
to think, Stan. You can just tell me
no, I mean,
what you think.
I think what I'd like to say is that community-based radio is representative of the community, and it's built by the community, right? Like this is like your public radio um, is built like by you and for you, and so I think that the people that work there and help facilitate that take that role incredibly seriously to be able to say like, does this represent our community? Can we do better? Is it, like, so this isn't some product. This is us, right? This is us putting ourselves out there. And I think that whether that happens at the local level or at the national level, like it really holds things to a very high standard. And I mean,
Yeah.
I love I love working with the people that I do at KQED because they are so good at what they do, but they also very much believe in that mission.
But I'm gonna just push a little bit more, and then you can say back off if you think it's. But I mean, there's local TV here. There's I'm in DC, WRC TV, NBC radio, right, which is a private, and I watched it from decades, and there is, the CBS local affiliate, and there's the ABC, WJLA, um, but but they're not as they don't produce stuff that's like that shakes things and that exposes stuff, and they just don't. I mean, how come? How come the public station does that? Why? Why doesn't? I mean, is it because of the sponsors? And again, if you don't want to get into it, that's fine. Is it because they have sponsors to worry about? Is it because they have? I don't know. But why does public radio and public TV do things and push things and go into things that the private organizations don't?
I'm not sure I have the answer that you're looking for, but I would say that one of the things that is unique about public media is that in the same way that it is community based,
Mm-hmm.
um, the 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 other stations like are also they're working together. So they're working for their community, but they're
Mm-hmm.
also working in a network. And so
Mm-hmm.
you experience that network in terms of NPR that sort of
Mm-hmm.
holds that network together.
Mm-hmm.
That the fact that it is not a competitive landscape. It is
Mm-hmm.
really a collaborative landscape. Is the idea
Yeah.
of like who can help me do this? You are really seeing collaborative work that builds on the work that was done before, but also work going forward and happening right now. And having if you've ever had somebody that you've worked with that is a true collaborator, a person that really there that wants to help you, and to know that there is like a whole network of stations that want to do
Mm.
that, that want to be able to say like, oh, you did that. How did that work? How can we do this better? How can we figure out how to make that happen? How can we keep on evolving that? Like that is a strong driving force. That is incredible. And I do think that of course there's a lot of ways to think about the underlying economics, or why does public media need our support, and
Yeah.
what does that mean for it to be supported from the communities that they represent. But I would say that the underlying engine is that collaboration, and that happens within, but it also happens like from the stations at large. And I wouldn't have been able to describe what I'm doing now, except that I work there now, and that
Yeah.
and that's been only the past few years for me. Before I was just a listener, not a active participant with.
Yeah.
But when I like when I call other stations for like what are they working on technologically, like they just share code with me, right? That's not something where it's just like it's just a
Hmm.
given. I
Yep.
mean, that what other
That's
company is just going to share code with you? And
right.
we know how well things in the open source world do, right? Like why is JavaScript so strong? It's like
Hmm.
it's because everybody was trying to solve the same problem of
Yeah.
making things work
Yep.
for a really long time. And so that's one of the truly special things about public media.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you. I think I have made some progress in my thinking, and that's great. Thank you for that. On with big questions, right? The next big question that I've been thinking about is this concept of it has a name. It's called the Gutenberg parenthesis. I'm sure you've heard of it. And the proposition really is this: Gutenberg, the inventor of the printing press, changed the landscape of communication in a big way by introducing um, printing, the printing press, and enabling the mass distribution, mass creation, mass distribution cost effectively, so that you could have things like newspapers and books and so forth, and with that, the era of reading and communicating through the written word, you know, went mainstream. Before that, of course, people did read and people did write, but they were, very tiny minority because it was expensive to produce books and to write to buy books. Anyway, so a parenthesis was opened around 1500 plus a little bit, where reading became the central way of communicating at the mass level, and it's closing according to this proposition. It's closing now. It started closing around the year 1999 2000 with the introduction of the internet and the ability for folks to communicate in ways that are more than simply text, right? The visual, audio, video, all kinds of ways, and where authorship, right? So you have an author of a book. It's a person or persons, and we know who they are, and we can blame them, or we can crucify them, or we can celebrate them, and so forth, is going into a world where you have something like the Wikipedia, right? Who wrote this page? Well, it's not one person; it's a community of folks. There are people who are watching it, and so on. And so we're getting into things where text is less central. The authorship concept is changing, um, and so forth. All right. Do you what are your thoughts about this? Is this concept useful of a parenthesis where text was central for a long time and we're perhaps going a different direction now, or what are your thoughts?
This feels like one of those like super hard questions that I bet you do ask people just randomly. Um, I don't know. It's a gigantic. It is such a gigantic question. Um, I do. I think things. Yes, I do think things are changing, and I do think it's definitely worthwhile considering it with that lens, to be able to. I don't. I think that right now, what you often get with technology is sort of a catalyst that really speeds speeds certain decision making up for us right now. Like we have more information than we did, but not necessarily more knowledge. And so we now have to figure out, where do we want to get that information from? How do I look at that information? How do I trust that? Where do I get that? And knowing that, in the same way that there was this acceleration by the printing press, there are lots of forms that we now consume media, right? That we get information. I oftentimes will have my own challenges of remembering, was that a Slack? Was that an email?
Mm-hmm.
Was that a text?
Mm-hmm.
Where is this conversation, and where are these spaces? And I think that these new digital spaces are helpful for us, because there are different types of ways of thinking about things, right? We can imagine, or we can interact in a way in a new space. We've often in the past talked about like Clubhouse. Like, what does that mean to talk in that space versus Twitter? And while Twitter might want to be able to create Twitter spaces, like, is that the same audio space? And is that the same as Discord? Is that, and as much as we might say this is what works for us right now, that will change again, right? And those dynamics will change. So I think that we are dealing with pretty rapid flux change, and that affects everybody and every profession, every medium, to have which of these spaces is the right match for us. That's my thought.
Yep. No, I agree.
But I'd love to hear your thought.
Oh, my thoughts. Well, my thoughts are also in flux, but where I stand at this point, and it sort of explains some things to me as far as the phenomena that we're seeing evolve, is the fact that it's becoming less centralized. And I think the process started with cable TV and so forth, right? The fact that information dissemination is becoming so fragmented, so you get information or non-information or lies or fake news, whatever you want to call it, from so many sources, that now it's really hard to say whether something is true or not, right? So you can be living in a bubble where you're getting information only from the sources that you want to get. So you have that selection. You are able to not only get the information from all these sources, but you're also able to select which sources you want to get them from. And those sources are not coordinating. There's no standard. It's not like you had the three networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, and PBS, and they had what is it? AP, right? Was the source which was on the ground and getting news, and they had a reputation to protect. And so you had all these identifiable authorities that needed to maintain integrity and so forth, right? Emitting news, and CBS and NBC, they just basically had styles of delivering them. It was more or less the same kind of news, right? So you had sort of a way to get to the same story being told to everybody. Now we don't have that, right? I think that's one of the consequences of this parenthesis being closed, is the decentralization of sources of information. Number one, and a lot of things are happening at the same time. Not only that you have more sources, but now the consumer of the news are also a producer of news, right, or of opinion. So they are also pitching in with their blog posts and a commentary, and that's being consumed as part of the cycle. So all that is basically creating, I think, a situation where it's hard to reach consensus in the way we used to reach consensus before. We all recognize these authorities, and so yep, okay. Uncle, what is it? Walter Cronkite said that we have lost the Vietnam War. Okay, well, he's a father figure that everybody respects, no matter where you are on the spectrum. And so when he says that has an impact. We don't have anything like that. Doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that I think consensus is important to be able to function as a democracy. And I think the old ways of reaching consensus are no longer available to us. And I think where some big innovation needs to happen, if we want to maintain this democracy, is how can we reach consensus in a new way that doesn't require two or three big heads and big authorities to tell us what is And so I think that's a very hard problem. I think we're going. I think right now we're in the throes of figuring out as a society, and not only in the U.S. I think around the world. Anyway, those are my fluxing thoughts. my my thoughts in flux. You see,
I
I'm
think
dyslexic,
I
so.
think one of the that part where I sort of talked about like technology as a catalyst or accelerating things, or that we have more to digest. I think that we've always, I'm sure if you were to look back to the 1400s,
Mm,
even though it might be saying like, well, this is
mm,
published as a book, so we should just say like this is the truth. The truth is that we always need to be able to have the ability to take a look at the information presented to us, and 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 really, how are we able to be proactively critical of like understanding an idea, a source, a thought? That's not easy, and I think that especially when there is so much um, information or ideas, like it can be quite exhausting to do that. I think that
yeah,
that that issue existed earlier and it exists today. I think that you could, yes,
yeah,
that's
yeah. I bumped into an article the other day, which was really interesting, and the headline was brand is going to disappear, or is going to be, a brand, right? A brand is going to be less and less important for the consumer, and the way that the consumer is going to make their choice is through what the AI tells you is that you want to buy, given what you've done, given what you've bought, right? So, and to the extent that the AI is going to surface things that turn out to be really, hey, that was a really good piece of suggestion, even though I don't know what this brand is or who created this thing. Um, I'm going to now rely on you, the AI, as opposed to rely on the brand, right? The Adidas brand or the Nike brand to buy my products, right? So AI replacing brand, it feels to me like AI replacing authority, right? The authority tells you, here's what is true. Um, and again, this is all in flux in my head. But that thing about the brand, people are relying a lot more on the search engine in Amazon than I want to find the thing produced by this company. Is becoming the way people make choices about what they buy. And so the question then becomes, is this the pattern where I'm going to trust this AI that tells me whether this article is full of, full of BS, or is it true? As opposed to an expert who's going to say, somebody in CNN, or my own knowledge, because I don't know a lot of things about COVID vaccines and so forth, right? Um, so what do you think? As a
yeah. I mean, I think, well, one, I'm no, I don't, I'm not exactly, I've had this described to me many times about brands, but I think possibly what you're describing is is AI replacing marketing, not brand. Because the idea of like how something is marketed to me is slightly different than the brand itself. The brand is like what I'm getting at the end, right? Like, hey, I don't know how I got here. The AI showed this to me, but I really do like this. Feels right on me. This is the right look and feel. Like this feels like
Mhm.
me. Um, Ultimately, whatever you get, let's think of that as a product first. Besides, before going to an idea, you can say like, hey, the AI gave me this cooking thing. I love the way it is in my kitchen, or it's terrible. It keeps on breaking. It's, like
Mhm.
I don't really trust this anymore. We do have to ultimately take a look at the things that are presented to us. So as much as I have some algorithm that is giving me new music to listen to, I do have to trust myself and say like, okay, I'm willing to try this out, but guess what? I don't like this,
Mhm.
and how that level of like whether this is, when we feel like, oh, we're being marketed to, and it's like that is the type of stuff that I love and it knows me really well. Like some people are really comfortable with that. Some people are really uncomfortable with the idea that there is some sort of AI algorithm that really has you dialed in and says like this is what the person, from the DC area wants at this time of year, and you've bought this many of these, and here you go. Um, I think that with the way that we consume information from the world, we are always in this moment where we're probably pushing on ourselves to be able to question, you know, like our own thoughts. Like this is the thing that I thought I knew, and how and the challenge, of course, is that if we take that idea of just challenging things that we know, um, we can have that play into another kind of cognitive bias that we have, which is just like I'm just ignoring that because it doesn't fit into my worldview or what I want, or I really want this at the end. Our brains are so complex that way to be able that we don't even understand how we're manipulating ourselves. So when we bring in these sort of like much faster outside actors like AI and some sort of news feed that's giving me products or ideas that it we really love, I'm I'm a little bit lost on
Mm.
how to keep our critical thinking alive at the same time to be able to one be able to recognize the utility, but also to be able to say like I still want to be a critical thinker. I don't want everything just like this is I don't want this infantile relationship where it's just like Lowell, this is the stuff you like. Just you don't even need to order it. I'm going to order it for you. Just hand your paycheck
Mhm.
over to me. These are the foods you love. These are the clothes you love. This is the music that you love, and here are the stories that you like. Like I don't want that.
Yeah,
Um,
but
but
most people, as we have seen, I think we can say that that's going to happen because most people, including myself, we've basically sacrificed our privacy for convenience, right? Um, and so, given that track record, that we're willing to sacrifice our privacy for convenience, I think we will probably sacrifice our, willingness to choose. I'm not saying you would. I think most people, the vast majority of people would. It's like, oh, okay, this thing knows what kind of music I like, and I like the music, and so the experience is great, and actually chose for me those things, so that's great. And actually, why is me choosing things randomly or asking people better? Why? Because the end product is right. So I'm going to let the AI choose for me. And I'm sort of describing how we may, or how most people may sort of live with that way of living, right? So I could say, okay, well, this thing knows, what kind of stuff I like. It suggests it to me. I don't have to spend time searching for it. I'm gonna spend my time doing something else. I'm gonna spend my time, I don't know, practicing the drums or reading Shakespeare or whatever, right? As opposed to looking for stuff, right? I could see a path towards us initially not being comfortable with that, but eventually saying, it's fine. It's a tool. It's what it is, right? Now I think I'm bothered by the fact that it's chipping away at my making choices, right? And so yeah.
yes, I mean I hear you, and I'm not. I wish I had a better answer for myself. I mean, really, because I think that there is a lot of change in that. So for instance, I have um, I have a terrible sense of direction. I really do. And you could say that GPS is the best thing that ever happened for me, to be able to find things. But actually, a lot of interesting people that I've met in my life have been because I've gotten lost. Um, I'm not saying that that's the thing I propose, but I'm just saying like that's an interesting part of life that that while utilitarian wise, like the GPS has helped me, it has not helped me from this other aspect of living life. And so that
Mm.
conversation that you have with somebody about like which is the best tomato should I get, and maybe it is or maybe it isn't, and maybe the AI knows the best, is like you are missing that human connection of that tomato conversation, or that thing that you got lost from, or the music that you asked, or why you might like this book. Because in that conversation that you have with somebody when they're trying to understand why you might like that book or that piece of music, you are describing something about yourself to somebody else and being known. And even though AI can claim to say, I already know you, it's that idea of revealing ourselves to other human beings that I think is such a worthwhile part of being alive. And so I don't know what that balance is for us right now moving forward with an AI that knows us and eliminates that other human connection, or how we maintain that human connection. But I think that is probably one of the bigger questions moving forward.
Yeah, yeah. No, I guess one tenet that we that one can take away, and that I live by, is um, the more technology, they say, not only technology but architecture, whatever it may be, um, demotes or inhibits interaction with other human beings, the the more I'm going to push back against it, right? So, like for example, the most awful invention I think in architecture in the history of humanity is the suburb, in my opinion, right? It's just deadening. You have people who live by nearby you in most suburbs who are not really neighbors, right? They're just people who live nearby you. It's not a community. This here where I live, it is not a community. It's a collection of houses where people live, and they have their lawns, and you have periodically you have the lawnmower going off, right? And you don't have a community, uh, and so anything that inhibits interaction, anything that inhibits interaction with other human beings, for me is suspect. And so that's sort of that's how I would react. I think you are reacting to it in real life. I would react to an AI that selects things for me. And the question I ask myself is, okay, that's nice, but is it at the cost of one of the fundamental things for me and my happiness and well-being, which is interacting with other people? Is it chipping away at that? And if it is, then I become, okay, either I use it selectively because it's a tool, and I treat it as a tool and not as a way of life, right? Uh, and so by treating things as a tool and not as a way of life, we bring in our will, meaning we are still asserting ourselves as human beings as opposed to becoming subservient and just part of the ecosystem of value exchange and all that. Anyway, so that's, I think we're aligned on that. And also, I think we're aligned on the fact that I also have a very, very bad sense of direction. Very bad. I get lost. I don't know why. I think some people are like that. I think it took me like 3 weeks to figure out how to go from when I used to work remotely, right? Not remotely, it was 2 years from an office. We moved to a house, right? New house. It took me like 3 weeks to not get lost going to our new house. So that's how bad. Probably that's worse than you. Really bad. But maybe that's one of the reasons I like you is we are both physically disoriented most of the time. Lowell, thank you so much for this very exciting hour. I think I picked out 3 or 4 new ideas and thoughts, and that's always a good thing for me.
Ahmed, it's always so great talking to you, and whether it's lost in the real world or lost in thought, I think you really you really continually challenge me, and I really appreciate having that chance to
Thank
connect with
you.
you that way.
I challenge myself all the time, and that's why it's hard for me to live with myself. But hey, I love talking to smart people like you, and we'll continue the conversation offline.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Lowell.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.